All right, folks, thank you so much. Again, thank you for joining us today. Realistically, we understand that you have a lot of things that you could be doing with your time. We really appreciating you taking the time out of your busy day to join us. And realistically, when we break this down, we want to think about, why we're all here. We're here because there's an obligation for all of us to provide a more secure instance for the data that we're hosting in our ServiceNow instances. And that's what we're going to be covering today is a method for getting these ServiceNow instances to be more secure and reduce the risk around that, quite simply through some of the applications that we're going to be talking about. First, again, I want to point out that we have the QA options. If you have any questions, please put them into the QA session. So this way we can follow through with them. I have a few slides that I'm going to run through, and then I'm going to jump into a live demo. And today's kind of a, I don't know if maybe I'm going to call it a treat. It's a little bit of a treat. I go through and I update my version of Security Center pretty much every few months. And we had a recent update that came out, and this is an update that is backwards compatible from Washington. I'm sorry, for Yokohama, which isn't quite out yet, and for Washington. So I updated this. So we're going to get a preview of what Yokohama is going to look like right before we actually release it. So this is going to be some pretty cool stuff we're going to be talking about. So maybe a little bit of a treat. You may get to witness me thumbing my way through this and stumbling a little bit. I hope that works out for everyone, but I'm really excited to show you folks what we're going to be dealing with. So when we break this down, to Security Center. What does security success look like in the platform of platforms? Today, we're going to dive into some of the key features and functions that will drive ease of use and simplicity for ServiceNow admins and security professionals alike. So we have all of this functionality. We want to ease the burden of security for those of us that aren't full-time security people. Maybe we're just ServiceNow admins that are really, really great at our job. Maybe we've been spending the last 15 to 20 years in the platform and we know it better than anyone else, but we don't really understand security. So this is where we want to ease that burden for our customers. And this is a solution to help solve easing that burden and providing some secure configurations. And it puts us in a place of understanding what great security can look like. So I'm going to click through to the next slide. The next slide is a safe harbor notice for forward-looking statements. Now, we're going to see some new stuff today. This is stuff that is available today if you're on Washington and beyond. Typically, I will not be speaking about anything that would be considered a future function or a future product. But I really do want to stress that you shouldn't be making purchasing decisions on forward-looking statements. You should be looking at what you can do today, what you can accomplish today, and how you can get that stuff accomplished. And that's why I have this up here. This is kind of like my little liability parachute in the event that something is said that's covering the future. And I really want to make sure that everyone understands that what we're talking about is available today in Washington. It'll be available in Yokohama, and it's generally available in all previous versions. Now, when I talk about previous versions, I'm going to talk a little bit about my history. I came over to this team at ServiceNow, and it's the Customer Security and Trust team. And here on the Customer Security and Trust team, we provide tools, guidance, services, and applications for our customers in order to secure their instances. Prior to this, I was part of our security operations business unit, where I worked on various products like our vulnerability response and our configuration compliance and our SIR product and DLP products. Fantastic products if you're looking for an integration single pane of glass for your security operations across your enterprise. It's really powerful. What we're talking about today is we are talking about this specific product, and this is a platform product. This is part of platform. It's already available to you. So if you're in Vancouver or beyond, it's part of your platform. For Vancouver, you will have to go to the store.servicenow.com, and you will have to go and download that and get that into your instance. But every other version, if you're on right now, if you have access to it, I'm going to encourage you to open up your instance, and I'm going to show you where to access it when we go through this. So I'm over here on the Customer Security and Trust team. And the reason why I bring this up is that for the past 2 years, I've been working on this product, and this product is something that is replacing an older product which had a very interesting name called Instant Security Center. So we went from Instant Security Center to ServiceNow Security Center. Really not original with the naming. And I say this in hopes that one of our executives will might view this recording and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that isn't original," because we keep saying it. We really want to stand out and have this product stand out. It's very different from what the Instant Security Center was. There was about 75 configurations. Right now, we're talking at over 200 configurations. The ability to scan, the ability to go and measure what's going on in the platform, to learn more, to follow best practices, and so on. There's a whole host of really meaty, juicy configuration functions that you can go and take advantage of. And the reason why I bring this up is that this product is going to celebrate its second birthday in this coming May. So with the Yokohama release, we're going to see that this has gone through several iterations. I think that's 4 iterations of growth in family releases and probably 8 different updates throughout the year. So it's pretty cool stuff. But why are we talking about this? Well, realistically, security is a partnership between us, the provider, and the customer, right? And we all have specific responsibilities. And ServiceNow provides customers with a secure cloud and the tools to secure your instances, workflows, and the use of your Gen AI. I want you to feel comfortable enough that you feel that your instance is secure, that you can put your most valuable data in there. And we do this because we provide our customers with extensive capabilities to configure their instances to meet their own security policies and requirements. We also hold ourselves to a standard where we configure the things that we're serving up to our customers in that instance. So there's the instance, but the instance is software, it's operating systems underneath it, it's hypervisors that exist out there, there are nodes that we have to secure, there are configurations that we need to make in order to make sure that we are secure and we're providing you with secure applications and the application servers and the hosted platforms that they're running on. So there's a lot that's out there. And then there's the data center provider that provides that compliance stuff, that vetting of employees, that screening, and physical security and controls that are out there. But we also have some responsibility there as well. So I need to know who my people are at ServiceNow. I need to know who the people are that are, that basically maintain those cages in the data centers where we host. And you need to know who your employees are and who to trust, because someone has to be trusted here. So this table shows a list of the key responsibility in the ServiceNow shared responsibility model. It's actually incredibly powerful. Our customers love seeing this, and they really want to tackle this stuff here. Realistically, today we're going to be talking about secure configuration of an instance, and ServiceNow Security Center provides for things like that secure configuration, authentication, authorization, and even some data management. So you'll be able to take advantage of this stuff, and you'll be able to use this stuff to make sure that your data is always safe in the platform or platforms. And there's a number of ways to do that. We're going to be pushing out an MFA requirement. There's also the ability to turn on selective MFA for specific users. You can set up strong passwords. You can obfuscate the specific name of your instance. You can change things in there and secure things through configurations that are going to make it incredibly difficult for anyone to get into one of our instances who isn't authorized to do so. So we want to encourage you to start hardening these systems, making them more secure, put in the compensating controls that you need to put in, understanding who's trusted in your environment, and then store your data in there. Well, let's break this down a little bit. When we start thinking about, what's being said across the industry, when we have companies like Gartner come through and they say things like more than 99% of cloud breaches will be traced back to preventable misconfigurations, that is a story that needs to be told. So when we hear companies like Gartner and Forrester, and they're our primary resources for where we gather information about what decisions we need to make in our infrastructure, this is a mic drop situation. This is something where our customers will hear this and they'll understand that, most of our customers will say, yeah, we do reference Forrester, we do reference Gartner, we do pull this information, and we use these organizations to help us steer and make key decisions. So this is something that I thought was incredibly impactful for the discussion that we're going to have today. And this leads us into things like the sneak report for 2022 on what are CISOs saying about the state of cloud security today. Organizations need to take proactive measures because 80% of organizations have experienced a serious cloud incident. 67% of CISOs highlighted misconfigurations as a problem, and 50% of organizations surveyed experienced 50 or more cloud misconfigurations per day. I want to focus on that last one because when we think about that, that's a lot. And that's even considering that your cloud solutions could be something Amazon, it could be something Google, it could be something, through Microsoft, it could be ServiceNow, it could be any solution out there that's hosting your data that's not on-prem. And this is where we start thinking about misconfigurations. 50 a day is a lot. And that's because these systems are moving targets. They're always out there and they're always changing. And there's always some type of update that's going on. And we stay ahead of this stuff. We stay on top of this. And I can't encourage you enough to go into your core function in support. So if you go to support.servicenow.com and you log in, there is a link to Core, and Core will take you to places where you can update your contacts, your security contacts, and get them up there so that you're notified if we determine that there's something that needs immediate attention. So this way you can go up there and identify your SOC type 2 reports. And you can go and gather the information that you need for attestation of different security audits that you may have. So we have all that information available to you. We want to make sure that we're ahead of that 50%. And largely, I believe we are. And that's because we stay on top of it. We have teams dedicated to really taking control of this. But what we're ultimately learning is that organizations need to take proactive measures to improve their security posture and ensure and avoid security misconfigurations. And that's where this application comes in. Now, most of my customers today are admins, and they really are managing all of the security content and concerns and expanding and customizing workflows. And all of this is challenging to them. They're building this stuff out and they're managing multiple products. So you might have ITSM in there, and then someone says, hey, you know what, we really need ITSM Pro, but we really need to integrate that with HR because HR needs to have approval processes, and we need to go and make sure that security understands that when a user makes a breach, that information is also tied to ITSM or HR because they went and breached policy by downloading video games. And all of this becomes a single pane of glass for all of this information. And that is incredibly challenging. Why is this important? You can go to all the settings to make all of this stuff work on your own. It's really a challenge to our admins to take this stuff on, to identify the security configurations that you need to focus on, to monitor what's going on in security, and to follow best practices to get ahead of all this stuff so that you really can just set it and forget it. I don't want to say forget it because this is a journey. This is something that you should be doing on a regular basis. So you should have a regular cadence around security. You should be meeting quarterly with your security team to discuss what's going on with your ServiceNow instances. And I say instances because we all have a dev, we all have a sub prod that we're testing stuff in, or our QA, and then we all have our production instance. And we want to make sure that we're tracking this stuff. We're going to get to some of that later. So we have our first poll question. So you're going to see this pop up. Currently, how familiar are you with ServiceNow Security Center? And this is a great question because realistically, I really want everyone to take the time and just pump in an answer here because I want you to be able to understand where you are today and then understand where we can go on this journey together in the future. This is something that we can really tackle and build into our cadence and identify things as they change. So that actually, these are great numbers. I think everyone's jumped in and answered. Almost everyone on the call has jumped in. And I see some great things. I've heard of it, but I've never used it. I use it occasionally and I use it regularly. Three people responded they use it regularly. I think that's fantastic. So let me end the poll and I'm going to share the results real quick. And then from here, we're going to keep moving because there's a lot that goes into it. So stop that and let me close this window. All right. So next is we're going to go into what are we talking about? We're talking about maintaining the highest levels of security monitoring and security configurations with ease through a suite of security related tools. Wow, that was a mouthful. I'm almost out of breath. Realistically, what we want to bring to the attention is we're easing that burden of having to provide security when we can go and identify the stuff and do it simply in one place. So security tends to be a mishmash of things, and there's so many domains that we could focus on, and it really becomes it can be really burdensome and it can be a heavy lift for a lot of people. But we want to take all of these applications that we have here. So when we think of Security Center, we want to think of feature groups that we're focusing on. And these feature groups, and these are the six primary feature groups. There are others that exist in there. This is where we can go and tackle specific things. Some of them are going to cover the entire platform. Some things are going to cover things like just user input, like maybe something that we might create as an application, and we might want to think about what's happening there. Some things are going to be for measuring, and some things might be for just following a list and just going through each of these steps step by step. There's a whole host of activity that can be accomplished here, and we do our best to make it as simple as possible. There are a couple of QR codes here. I tell my family, and if you've been on any of my calls, you've heard me say this, that I tell my family, don't just go around scanning QR codes with your phone. Avoid it like the plague. It's probably one of the easiest ways to go out and compromise any system that's out there. I can compromise the system with a simple QR code that's going to take you somewhere with a little drive-by that I can go and grab any data that I want from you. I can install anything I want on your phone from there, and it's happened. It's happened time and time again. Here's where I'm telling you that I personally, Joe Pizzo, who works for the customer security and trust team here at ServiceNow, I created these. These are links to the documentation, a fantastic class on how to use Security Center up on Now Learning. It's also free. A video library. The video library is, if you really like the sound of my voice, well, that's great news because you can go to the video library, and there's a bunch up there today, and I'm going to be adding more probably this week on some of the latest stuff that we've done. And then there's the Security Best Practices Guide, which everyone should be going through at a minimum to identify what's happening there. Now, um, I have another 16 slides to go through, but I'm going to skip those because realistically, it's kind of boring. So I'm going to give me 1 second. I am going to open up my ServiceNow screen and we will go through this presentation. So, and there we go. All right. So this is kind of new. And the reason why I bring this up is that we've changed some of the layout and some of how we navigate through the product. It's actually pretty cool stuff. I thought that going through presentations mm, might be a little bit boring. So let's jump into something real. We still have some time here. I can spend some time going through this. Now, what we've done is we used to have a banner that popped up, and the banner would take you to different links of all of the different feature groups. But what we did was we broke these feature groups down into specific areas that we could just click through and it'll take us to where we want to go to. So if I want to go and identify my best practices, I can go and hit my best practices box here, and it's telling me that I'm at 036, which, admittedly, I think I know everything and I've gone through and did things on my own, but I can go and change that if I want. So I can go and take advantage of these and I can go and build this out. If I need to go and hit my threshold of what happened over the last 7 days, which I haven't used this instance in 7 days, we would see that there's data that anything that has changed, any alerts that have been kicked off would be here. We can see any customer actions, and we're going to talk about those. And we can see our hardening and compliance score. That's going to be the key of largely what we're talking about. We can also go into individual security consoles. And for each of these security consoles, when we click through on them, it's going to take us to that specific console and the specific data that's associated with that. So here, clicking on Security Configuration Console will take me to a security configuration dashboard that will show me where we are so we can see what my hardening score looks like over a period of time. So we can go in and identify what do we look like on February 1st compared to what do we look like on February 26th. And we can see that there's been a drop down from one score up here down to another. So we went from a 96% down to 95%. So there's probably some new stuff that popped up. We can also go in and look at any findings that have been mapped through our scanner. So hardening covers platform, scanner covers user input data. This is where we can go and track that. Customer actions is where we can go and see if there's any work that we need to accomplish. So things like end of life of 3 DES and password 2 fields might be something you need to talk about. That's going to be end of life in September of 2025. So you got about what's that, 8 months left that you can really go and take care of this. I'm sorry, 7 months left, right? We're almost we're at the tail end of February. So, there's gonna be some stuff that we're really gonna need to start focusing on. And this will take us to links for each of these boxes where we can go and view all those results. When we want to, we can always go back. But I want to take a step back to how do we get here? Well, first we can go right to the admin menu and go to Security Center. Now, if you have your instance open, you can follow along with me. Your instance may appear slightly different, but largely we can get through any of these fields together. And realistically, you may see a banner where I see individual consoles for me to go through and map to. I can also go into my filter navigator, and in my filter navigator, I can type in Security Center, and we can see that that's there, and I can favorite it, and now it'll be part of my favorites where I can go through and I can say, hey, here's my Security Center. I can always get to it. So I can go to the admin menu, I can go to my filter navigator, I can go to my favorites, or if I use this on a regular basis, I can go into history, and I can hit any of these links, and it'll take me right into Security Center. Pretty powerful stuff. With Monitoring Console, I can go in here and see information about monitoring. And this is where my cheese moved today. I upgraded this earlier because I wanted to make sure I was on the latest version and it's not pulling in all of my data. And I think it needs to rectify that over the next day. But we'll get to that at another point. We're going to talk about other areas, or we can talk about our security posture control. This is where we can go in and identify where we are with how we're moving forward. So our best practices, anything that we might have on our posture dashboards, things like active integration accounts that we need to track, or active privileged accounts that we need to track, or users who never logged in. We can go and see that. And if you look over here, all the way on the right side, we'll also have helpful links to resources. So this can take us to individual guides on specific portions of the product or portions of the industry that we might need to go and gather. And we can also click on more key resources, and that'll take us into our overview. Now, if you look with each of these new dashboards or each of these new consoles, we can go and see that we have an overview. We can dive into our best practices and see what's going on there. Or we can go into our security posture dashboard and drill into some of that stuff to see what's going on there as well. So we'll have the ability to drill and dive into things very deeply in order to get to where we want to be. And this will take us right in so we can measure that score that we have. We can see that drop off right there. We can see anything that might exist. So this is where you're going to land if you open Security Center today. If you go in and open Security Center right now and you're not on the same version I'm on, this is what you'll see as your overview page. And this will take you to what areas you need to be concerned about with hardening. So what specific things do I need to worry about? Now, I've gotten rid of my criticals. I have a few high priority hardening issues, but I also have some moderates. I can also take this and view all and go into this and deep dive into this. It'll also give me information about data protection. It'll pull in any data that I might be concerned with. But realistically, let's take a look at some of the hardening settings. And this is where I can go in and identify my hardening, my scanning, and my security, my customer actions here. Now, I can look at a score comparison and see where I was last month to here. I can see what my score trend, but my overview page really showed me that information already. I'm going to look at all of my settings. And this is where we can go go through and we can identify our hardening settings. And here's where I can click right in and I can say, hey, you know what? I need to check the compliance of this setting. And when this pops up, it's going to tell me what the criticality is, what the score impact is, and that score impact ties back to that overview pane. So if we go to our overview pane here, right, this is where we are, security posture dashboard, or our overview pane, we'll see that score come back, so it'll show us that information. Realistically, the dashboard is going to give us everything, and that 92%, or that 95% is telling me that 95% of my hardening settings are set. And I'm doing really well. And that 95% comes from an algorithm that's generated off of the score impact from all hardening settings. So this is a critical, so this is going to be above, I think, a 0.65. And then the high are going to be between like 0.50 and point, like, 0.65, and then low and medium they'll group together below that. This is where I can identify what does this mean? And I can go and see a specific description about this. I can go and see if there is a functional impact across our instance so we can see what's going on there. It'll link me to documentation. If there's any activity, I can feed my activity or I can provide comments in here. I can also see information like how do I set this? And this is a simple toggle switch. But there's also some things that you might need to look at. So this is a safe DB override and cannot be altered once it is set. So if you set this to be protected, you can't just go and alter it. You'd have to reach out to us and get involved with our organization. There's also, when you go into support, you can see some of these. There's a whole host of these that have that safe DB setting, but there are also a bunch that are secure by default. So you can go and take advantage of these and identify which are the ones that you need to focus on right away. The same functions that you're used to in the platform of platforms, they're here as well, where we can go in and identify in this workspace what are the non-compliance. And I can see all of my highs, mediums, and lows, and I can go through and click on them and make changes. And this is where we can go through and say, hey, you know what, this one's a high. I want to go through and configure this and follow the steps to configure this to make sure that I'm in a place where I can go and I can take advantage of this. It gives me a lot of power to really do that. Any changes I make will pop up over here in the activity. So we'll be able to track what's going on. Now, that's all stuff that applies to platform. So it's an umbrella over platform of the configurations to make platform more secure. When we go into Scanner, we can see some comparison, we can see some trending, but realistically, I'm going to date myself a little bit here. And if you're familiar with the old MCSE training, there was the acronym. It was AGLIP, and it was Add Global to Local Policies. And this is where we can go through and kind of map this here, where I would create checks or take existing checks and I would add those to suites. And I can even add suites to suites. So I can have parent suites and child suites, but I'd always have checks in there. So this is where I can go through and I can take advantage of creating my own, where we may have an unlimited amount uh, of checks that we can create. This is infinite. We can apply them to things like a table that would be created or used beyond the standard tables, or a column that might have some type of information, or a script that's been configured that may contain maybe some unsavory scripting behavior, and we might want to go and check for that stuff, or a linter check to see if anything was developed using something that could be considered potentially malicious. Not necessarily malicious, but potentially. It's like packing. For those of you that are part of security teams and have worked on security, not all bad things are packed, but not all packed things are bad, but all bad things are packed. So when we're looking to identify behaviors of certain malware, we would look for behaviors of packing. Packing tells me that it could be something bad, and it's more than likely that it would fall into that category. And if it is bad, it's definitely going to be packed, right? So that's where we would go and we would break that down a little bit. But I really want to focus a little bit on the checks and how they're built into the suites. So with a suite, I can go in here and I can say, hey, you know what? We have a bunch of suites. We have a suite generated for API, deprecated API. And in here, I have some child suites that are included in there. But I can also go through and I can add specific checks in here as well. So as part of this, I can go and build a check, add that so that I can go and take advantage of it. Same thing with parent suites. This could be part of a parent suite and so on. I can also go through and we can create a new suite where I can go and build something out, or we can just take advantage of one that exists already. And now we can add these checks, edit this, and I might want to include any bit of information that's in there. So we can go and build any of these out so we can identify what's already in there. I can also use filters to sort all of this stuff down based on specific information. So if I'm looking for a specific glide record to modify, I can go and do that. If I'm looking for specific keywords to search for categories, I can go and do that. And these are part of what we would expect out of the platform because this is how we use the platform to go and filter and build conditions for stuff like this. Now, when it comes to results, results are grouped in by a scan. So if I run a scan and I say, hey, I want to run this auditor scan, this will bring back these results so that we can go through and say, hey, we identify these findings and we can go into all of these findings and we can start doing something with them. We can start running scripts against this to be able to process this data, or we can go through and test these findings to validate what's going on with this stuff. And this puts us really in a power position so we can go and grab this and really take advantage of it. But these are really grouped by scans. When I really want to do something, I want to go into findings a la carte and I want to grab the menu for findings. And from here, I can go in and I can click on this information and I can assign a task to this. And when I assign a task, I can go and take this task and assign it to a specific assignment group to build a workflow around this. This will now end up in that group's queue with these findings, and they'll be able to go through and they'll be able to like track this stuff down. So maybe we want to go to the audit administrators and we want to say, hey, go look at this. And here's a description of this. And here's the remediation steps that we have. And we can track this and we can start working on that. It's pretty powerful stuff. Now, I have my user metrics, but we can go and get to this by going over and hitting our core screen in Security Center. And in Security Center, we can go and grab this and look at our monitoring console. And here's where we would go and see some of that stuff that might have changed. But we'll also have a way to get to our metrics from here. Now, we can go and look at that and see if there are any notifications that we need to build out. And these notifications are going to be very simple as to how we're going to build them. We can just go through and click on them and send a notification when very specific things happen. I want to point out that this is not part of notification engine. So these are very specific to what is part of this product. So this is where we can go and say the who, what, when, and how, and build these notifications in here. So in addition to this, we can go through and we can go and hit our security metrics. And our security metrics are where we can go and start measuring things. Now I can go right into my metrics and see the important stuff to me. And we can go and see everything that's happening here that I've tracked out. So if I have like failed logins that I'm looking at, I can go and track that. If I have security elevations or impersonations that I've built in or we've seen happen, we can go and track that as well. But realistically, what I like to do is I like to go through some of these menus directly, and I like to look at some of the privileged users. So we can see that there are some local logins by privileged users that are not protected by MFA. So we might want to go and measure this and say, hey, you know what? There's a large number of these folks that are logging in without MFA, and they have access to a lot of things. We can go and track all of our successful logins. We can see any inactive users or active users. If we want to go, we can go and look at just the users and track what's happening there as well. Now, we might have some failed logins, and there might be a story to tell around that. And that's where we can go and say, hey, you know what? We've identified that there were a bunch of failed logins that really didn't do anything to the platform, but we saw them happen on a Wednesday at 2 a.m. Let's go and track that down and pass this to our security team. And lo and behold, our security team notices that they're having the same type of events in other applications where they may or may not be experiencing some negative impact from those types of events. Maybe it's a password spray and pray that hit ServiceNow and another cloud system or an internal enterprise system, and those other systems are failing where we're not. This is because we have a lot of things that go into protecting what's going on here. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to be protected against everything. Bad things can happen, but the more we do to configure our instances to be more secure and the more we're watching them, the better off we are. And that's how we get ahead of the game. We want to protect ourselves against those who would operate in a malicious or nefarious manner. And that's where this comes in. Next, we can go through and we can hit things like our overview and go back to our security center home. And from here, we can go and look at our security posture control. This is where we can see things like our best practices and be able to go through and identify what's happening here. And this is actually pretty cool, where we can go through and say, we want to enforce the use of strong passwords. I like this one a lot. I think this really is easy to explain to most users. They tell people, hey, use a strong password, you'll be more protected, right? It could take, a trillion years to crack my password because I'm using 16 characters with multiple unique characters and upper and lower case, and I'm using a phrase instead of using just a password, right? And that's great. It's fantastic. But we might want to have a policy around all this stuff. And this is where we have a workflow that you can follow. And it's going to take you to each of these steps so that you can go through and you can track this and you can step into this and say, hey, how should I set this up? What should my password be compared to what I want it to be? And this is where we give that guidance. And that guidance is going to lead us to how we're going to configure and set the fields in the password policy form. So that when I go in and build this policy, we can go and say specifically what we want to accomplish here. And then we can finally test it. And when we're done, after we've tested this, we can complete this best practice. And now, when we go back to our best practices, we're going to see that our records changed. We've started moving towards building that foundation. I can then go in and I can change the default login credentials and follow these steps. Now, if you're a newer customer, this is going to be more helpful than what we would see from an existing customer who's been around for years. But that doesn't mean that it's not helpful for those existing customers. Those existing customers can also take advantage of this stuff and really benefit from learning a little bit how security works. So here we can go and do this, build this best practice, and then when we go back, we can go in and see exactly what's going on here and start tracking that. And that's where things like the security posture dashboard and best practices comes in to show us exactly what's happening that we can really take advantage of. Now, so far, we've covered some hardening. We've covered some scanning stuff. We've covered best practices. We've talked about notifications. Let's talk about really the last part of this. And the last part of this is what bridges that gap. And we all hear it that there's a big cybersecurity shortage of people out there that really understand it. And we want to bridge that gap, and we want to have learning available to all of our customers so that our customers can go in and take advantage, and they'll be able to go and start tracking what's going on and learn what's happening in their instance, right? So first, you have core. You have information on how to access core. Core is where you can go up and you can identify those regulatory documents that you might need to support an audit. You can go in and identify things like how do I change my contact, my security contact specifically. It's pretty powerful. If you want to learn about edge encryption, you can. If you want to learn about encryption and key management, we have links there. We also have information about pen testing, data access controls, white papers that exist. We have information about specific regulations based on industry and based on region. So maybe you're in Singapore and you want to go and track this information, or the UK, or you have HIPAA concerns. The learning portion has a whole host of information for anyone who wants to learn more about the platform of platform and how to secure it. Realistically, I think that everyone should jump in and be going and taking that class that's available through Now Learning. Go and create a Now Learning. It's nowlearning.servicenow.com. create an account up there. Um, get your admin to help you. So that this way you can go and have access to that. Get your admin to help you gain access to core. This is where you can go and start tracking all of this information and start tracking what you're learning and how you can adopt these things to provide for a better security environment. It's really powerful stuff. Let's give it one more minute. And so Security Center delivers some key benefits. Increased in security posture, ensure compliance, identify and monitor, right? That's where we really shine, right? You can put all this data in, but if you don't know what's going on, that's where we put this information in so you can go and tackle this stuff. We want to ensure that there's any that everything's compliant with any regulatory mandates. We want to make sure that there is an ongoing repository of resources to follow that stuff. So those embedded learning resources there. We want to address any customer options that can be changed and follow best practices. Ultimately, I want you to feel confident in in ServiceNow and in your instances to know that you're putting your data in a place where it's more secure. It's not perfect, but we're doing a lot to track what's going on. We're putting in options that you really need to jump in and you really need to go and set things so that you can go and set things and move forward. So there's a lot that goes in there. So next place is our last poll question. I know we only asked two, but after this presentation, what is the likelihood you will use the security center moving forward? Oh, so some anonymous attendee just asked. This is a great question. I'm going to answer this one live. How can we skip the hardening setting, which are not applicable for our instances, so our score won't affect? That is a fantastic question. So one of the things that we have in the roadmap right now, and I promised that I really wouldn't do a lot of this. I try not to talk too much, but this is a roadmap ish instance, and this is probably something that's going to fall into Zurich, or maybe even later into like our A release. And there's going to be an option to go in and click a checkbox, and that checkbox will be to ignore this setting, accept the risk, and in some cases it might go and create an escalation for approval. In other cases, it might be to just accept that risk and recalculate your score without that. So if you're at 97% and you really don't need to worry about this thing because you have compensating controls, you can check a box and your score is not going to drop down from 97%. It's going to stay there. It's not going to be included. It may even go up if that's been included. So there's a lot that goes in there. So this is actually really cool. I'm going to share the results of the poll. Um, the biggest um, the biggest response we got is I can't wait to use Security Center. I think that's pretty cool. Um, I hope I answered that question. In the future, there will be a box that you can select it and ignore that and not calculate so it won't affect your score. But that is something that is coming in the future. I try not to talk futures, but since you brought that up, that's really a great question. I'm glad that came up here. Any other questions? All right, let's move ahead. And I'm going to stop sharing here. So there's a couple of things that I want to point out. Security Center is free. It's part of platform. It's available in the ServiceNow App Store um, if you are on Vancouver. No, Utah. I'm sorry. If you're in Utah, it is available at store.service now. Beyond that, it's already part of platform. It's built in. There is no cost to this. You go to the store and download it. If you're on Utah, Vancouver and above, it's already part of your instance. Security Center improves organization security posture with embedded security best practices and recommendations. I can't even stress how many subject matter experts from ServiceNow and the security industry have contributed to the information around this. This is something that really like stands out. And then on top of this, we want our system admins to really feel like they're included in this. And that's why there are detailed learning resources. And we try to simplify some of this, that there's always a way to go and gather this. There's documentation on everything, but we provide those foundational security guides, those topical security deep dives, access to key security and compliance portals out there. Realistically, this is where you have a call to action for you to go out and build this out. Now, there's another question that came in. How can we create the task to other team in Security Center? Now, that's a great question. You can create a task in your scanner in your results, right? I'm sorry, in your findings. In the future, this is another future, we will be building in workflow where I can go in and say, hey, we have these 10 things, these 10 fall into this person's domain or this team's domain. Let's assign this to this team to go in there. That is a great question, and it's a great use case. And in fact, that might even fall into like some of the ITSM integration that we're planning in the future. But these are things that are going to happen down the line. And I'm sure those of you that have been around with using ServiceNow for as long as I have, you probably understand that with ServiceNow, we put a lot up front into developing, and then we start building in little things as we go. And I've seen this product improve over the last 2 years since the product's been you know released. We can see that this product has improved drastically, and those improvements are just going to keep growing and growing and growing.